what the institution of the Constitution did, it created a framework for politicizing the conflict between these two forces, between the mass public and the wealthy who always want to increase their wealth, and the public that wants not to feel oppressed by the kind of economic system they're living under or the kind of political system they're living under. Right after they finished the Constitution, immediately people began taking sides, and what none of them could foresee is how the development of capitalism was going to make this conflict even more acute. So, for example, there was some foresight of the development of commercial capitalism, but not industrial capitalism. So you had this conflict between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton that I've mentioned in previous episodes of this show. Well, Jefferson tried to work out how you could have a broad middle class, like Aristotle recommended, and his solution was that lots of people should have land of their own. You should have a country full of small landowners rather than some big landowners or people who own the financial and commercial structure of the country. He won the presidency twice, but he lost the argument because society started moving in the other direction anyway. On Hamilton's side, he believed that there are better people who should be ruling, and those are generally the people who do well economically as well. So already Hamilton was developing a philosophy of how to make the United States a great commercial empire and develop our manufacturing sector, the beginnings of capitalism in the United States. But he saw this as a way to increase the greatness of the nation and therefore the greatness of the people leading the nation, not so interested in equality and democracy as Jefferson was, which is kind of ironic because, as we all know, Jefferson owned slaves. So their thinking was muddled on this. How do you reconcile economic inequality with political equality? And the story has been a tension between those ever since. But when industrial capitalism started developing towards the middle and the end of the 1800s, this problem became even more acute. Capitalism is a set of institutions that enabled human beings within a society to create much greater wealth than had been known in the past. But at the same time, most of this wealth is being channeled into the hands of a few, the people who already own capital, investable types of property. Meanwhile, the average person becomes more and more dependent on working for these other folks. The investing class is able to dominate the working class because they control the government as well as great wealth that they can use to hire their own armies, as happened earlier in this nation. Things like that. The armies of, not really armies, but they did get militias, state militias on their side, and they hired their own goon squads and things like that. Anyway, getting back to the point here, which is under capitalism, the problem became more acute because there's more wealth, but more of it was going to the elite. And you had growing economic inequality and continual strife between the very wealthy, the investing class, and the working people up through to the end of the Second World War. Now, what happened then was there was a brief period under very specific economic circumstances in which inequality ceased to rise. Everybody was growing a little bit richer at about the same rate. Incomes were rising about the same rate, and there was much less inequality overall. These were specific circumstances, which I'll talk about in a future program, that were bound not to last. Lots of people on the left side, not the far left as they call it, but like in the center left, like Joe Biden and his Build Back Better, I think what they're trying to do is get back to the economy of the 50s and 60s because there was less inequality and some sense of social stability. And somehow people who grew up in that period or came of age of that period think that's normal. But in the course of U.S. history, it's not normal. It's been much more normal for there to be instability, which is a feature of capitalism, constant change, constant movement, and growing inequality. So in the 1970s, those conditions started to erode, and we went back to the same old struggle between the very wealthy and the less wealthy. Today, the oligarchy is winning. Our sense of democracy is that it's slipping away. And I think we really need to think in our own minds about how to reconcile this, how to resolve this in one direction or another. My side is on democracy, obviously, because I'm not one of the very wealthy. And I think we need to think about how we could create better institutions, change the institutions we have, and what a society would look like where there is much more equality and not this tension, which leads me in the direction of socialism, a topic for one of the upcoming shows.